you bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
A good summer Wednesday morning, Eagle fans. You got Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We got Johnny Mac for the whole show today. No Eagle practice, or at least not allowing the media in, but the media was there yesterday. You were there, John. And I would say that maybe since that ill-fated Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs last February, we probably had a chance to pick up a little more, learn a little more about the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday than any other day since that loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, because number one, they made some important people available that you guys got a chance to talk to and question. And number two, they actually hit a green practice, Johnny Mac. They practiced with a purpose yesterday.
Yeah, the pads came on. So first day they were allowed, and they did put them on, and you find out more. You really do, because you play football with pads. You don't play it, and so it's this counterintuitive notion. You're not allowed to prepare with pads for safety reasons. We know all the reasons ad nauseum, but yeah, I mean, this is where you find out who can actually play, and who maybe it would be a great flag football player, but not necessarily a great professional football player. So it is meaningful, and you find out a little bit more, and then you see some, Sean Desai puts in the big nickel all of a sudden with the pads, and maybe you start to see some of the thought process is developing on where this team wants to go. We kind of know where they're going offensively. I mean, there's not much change. Obviously, they had to change coordinators, but Brian was here, and it was a successful offense. So you don't fix what isn't broken. You could argue that with the defense as well, but people will argue with you. So it is, it was a big day, and it was a more valuable day as far as evaluation. And that's how the coaches will look at it as well. So not only reporters, but real quick, you said the players, this is a day off for them as well. So no walkthrough today, and they'll get back to work tomorrow. And the first two back-to-back practices, first time Thursday and Friday. So that'll be interesting as well. I imagine they'll have the pads on for at least one of those sessions as well. So, it's ramping up. Acclimation period over.
Over and done with. The actual practice, the get ready for the season practice, not just conditioning practices, started in earnest yesterday. Let's start off the field, but before we go on to the field, Brian Johnson met with you guys before the practice ever got underway. I saw a couple clips from it. You were there. Adding new wrinkles. You don't want to say static. You just mentioned you don't want to fix something that isn't broken. And the Eagles' offense is far from broken. But Brian Johnson does want to put his own stamp on this offense, and he'll certainly do so over the course of the year. But out of the gate, what do you think we're going to see out of Brian Johnson that will be at least slightly different than the offense that they ran the last 2 years with Shane Steichen calling the plays?
I don't think you're going to see much different at all. Maybe a little bit more, as we said, getting the receivers in, getting the running backs in the receiving game from a standpoint of throwing a curveball. Brian mentioned the more points of stress you put on the defense, the better. Everybody knows they want to get the ball to AJ and Devontae, and we saw it last year a little bit with Zach Pascal. Nobody would cover Zach because they're like, oh, we can't cover Zach, and all of a sudden he's running by himself for a touchdown. So the more people you can get involved in the stress, and I do think DeAndre Swift brings a valuable trait in the fact that he can run wheel routes. He can take those bubble screens and maybe make something out of them. So I'm not talking about the dump off game. I'm talking about actual design plays for the running back as a receiver. I think that might be part of the mix with DeAndre. Other than that, it's about evolving, adding more things, as the quarterback gets more comfortable, and he looks very comfortable. And as he processes very quickly, the one thing you can't do is stand still, as you mentioned. You have to evolve because, and I mentioned this on our night show, Football 24/7 last night with Tone DeShields. I mentioned that. It's like everybody says it's a copycat league, and it is. But I always say it's a very slow-moving copycat league, and they often have to get to the off-season to do all the studies and all that kind of stuff. So everybody on the Eagles' schedule, they're top dog in the NFC, looking at the Eagles going, how are we stopping this? And they're spent their entire off-season trying to slow them down at least, especially the teams that are relevant in this discussion, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Commanders most notably, but even San Francisco, teams like that, they're focused on what they did. How can we make it more difficult? So if you're just static, they're going to catch up. But if you keep evolving, and I think that's the good part of where the quarterback is, this is 2 straight days, Jody, where 2 straight practices, not 2 straight days, but when the first team has been out there, the ball barely hits the field. I mean, I don't think you can count Jalen Hurts' completions on one hand, incompletions on one hand over 2 practices. Ball's not hitting the ground, and that's because he's processing quickly. He's making the right decisions. The football's coming out. The football's going to where it's supposed to go. And that's a big positive as well.
And part of that is, and you can tell me how good he was because he told me how good he was yesterday, is Quez Watkins is the number 3 wide receiver. We know A.J. Brown is a superstar. We know Devontae Smith is a superstar in the making, and Dallas Goedert's one of the best tight ends in football. And yes, they're going to have an added emphasis on getting the ball in the passing game to the receivers, specifically DeAndre Swift. I didn't know that Quez Watkins had become elite during this offseason.
That's probably not the word he should have used. But look, I'm not gonna kill the guy for having confidence in himself. Good for Quez. But yeah, I would not have used the word elite.
Yeah, there's confidence and then there's cockiness. There's a difference for me between those 2 things. And Quez got to get a little bit more done before he starts tossing the elite word around.
Well, I'm from the standpoint of players. Confidence is a big thing with players. And I think you saw Quez as a perfect example because I think he lost his confidence last year. And I think Nick Sirianni tried to build it up in the offseason. Maybe it's working. He has been the best of the other receivers, clearly. So for people thinking Olamide Zaccheaus would come in here and be the 3rd receiver, well, it might happen, but over the first 4 days, it's not been close. I mean, he's not pushing Quez at this point. Now, maybe Quez falls apart, and consistency has been one of the problems with Quez, but he has had a great practice on Sunday. Was arguably the player of the day. Made a number of tough catches, and he's playing well. But yeah, I would not have gone down that road. But good for him. He's got the confidence bubbling up. But yeah, I mean, especially in this town where you see literal elite receivers.
Yeah.
Now, there is a big difference between A.J. Brown and DeMonte Smith and then Quez Watkins. But Quez is here. That's the beauty. He's here to be the third receiver. And, all he's got to do is make the plays when they come to him, like the Super Bowl. Now, he was playing through a shoulder injury last year, so maybe that factored in some of his struggles. But, I mean, if he could just make the plays, he's not going to get a lot of traffic, especially now when you add what we talked about with DeAndre Swift potentially. Might even be less traffic. But when the ball comes your way, you got to make that play.
Since yesterday here in Philadelphia, with the Major League Baseball trade deadline being 6 p.m., the Phillies garnered a lot of attention. Eagles almost became a back burner story, which I thought was funny because it was probably the best day to evaluate the Eagles, like I said, since the Super Bowl. But more people paying attention to the Phillies because it was trade deadline day. Well, now the attention focus is back over to the Eagles and their general manager, Howie Roseman. We know that Howie is very good at watching other teams, what they're doing and waiver wire and stuff like that. He made the trade for GJ right before the season started last year. So he's open-minded on a lot of different things. Third wide receiver now no longer an issue since Quez has reached elite status, Johnny Mac?
No, I don't think they're looking for a third receiver. I think that's way on the back burner for Howie, considering, I mean, it's got to be safety or linebacker first and foremost. Yeah, I think they're comfortable enough with Quez, and if he falters again, the added depth they brought in with Olamide Zaccheaus, I think a lot of people, there's not much better you can do than AJ and Devontae at the top. So, I look at, Cooper Kupp got hurt with the Rams, and I'm not paying attention to the Rams, but when you look at the depth chart without Cooper Kupp, it ain't good. So to have two is pretty good. It's only, and we talked about a lot when DeAndre Hopkins, people want to build a fantasy football team. Doesn't work that way. Guys like that want the football. They want to be involved. You're not getting that type of player to be the third receiver. So, it's a little bit crossing your finger from an injury standpoint. You certainly hope AJ and Devontae don't get injured. And then they're fine. Linebacker and safety, though, they're not fine. So I think Howie's got more important things to worry about than third receiver.
Fair enough. All right, then let me ask you about that linebacker spot. Because, again, Christian Ellis got some first-team reps. He's been at least going back to OTAs, a off-season darling and making some plays and opening some eyes. Nicholas Morrow, not so much. And we've noted many a time here on the show, just because it stands out, nobody in the league cuts a deal like the one that Nicholas Morrow did with no guaranteed money. And we're talking about a couple of $100,000 here on $1 million cap, but every $100,000 helps with your Howie Roseman doing something like that. If Nicholas Morrow isn't starting, is he departing? Would the Eagles move off Nicholas Morrow and potentially release him? That means Sean Bradley moves up. Other linebackers need to move out. If you're just taking a guy out of the mix, somebody's got to fill the void. If Morrow's not starting, would he be here as a backup, or you think the Eagles would just move on from him altogether?
I mean, as you mentioned, they don't have any guaranteed money invested in them, so they can do whatever they want. They can move on. It's interesting. That was probably the most interesting thing in practice is that they played a lot, and I mean a lot, of big nickel, which means 3 safeties on the field. So in essence, Nakobe was the only linebacker on the field in first team reps. And if that's the plan, and it might be the plan because Sean has done it in the past a little bit, then you start talking about Kayvon Wallace. Kayvon Wallace is getting first team reps. He's getting first team reps at safety, and he's getting first team reps at linebacker in essentially the nickel, where they have 3 safeties on the field. And they sort of toggled Edmonds and Wallace back and forth. So you don't know who's playing linebacker. You don't know who's playing safety on a particular snap, and you have to figure that out. Now, we're not talking about Ronnie Lott. I see Mike Gill. I was on his show. I mentioned that. We're not talking about Ronnie Lott when we're talking about these safeties. But are they better for that circumstance than Nicholas Morrow or Christian Ellis? Maybe. But I'm not comfortable with either. And by the way, the first 2 plays, the Eagles rolled out big nickel. Literally, the first 2 plays, they got gashed on both of them.
On running plays.
No, Kelsey on passing plays.
Really?
Kelsey was downfield, and I forget who caught rolling out Jalen Hurts, and he just obliterated Terrell Edmonds, who was playing linebacker. And then was the big touchdown from Jalen Hurts to A.J. Brown. It's about 50, 60 yards. It didn't look good early. Now, that doesn't mean much, and they just unveiled it. But I'm not comfortable. And by the way, Christian Ellis got more first-team reps, significantly for more first-team reps when they had 2 linebackers than Nicholas Morrow. So he may have already surpassed Nicholas Morrow. But it's going to be interesting how much they use that big nickel. And Sean Desai must like Kayvon Wallace, because I did not see that coming, because he's been, over the past couple of days, way more relevant than I had ever thought.
And hopefully he lives up to the coach's belief in him, if that's the case, if they're going to give him actual reps in safety, not big nickel looks, but when they
both. He got big nickel
both.
looks.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was playing linebacker and safety, and so was Edmonds, and so was Sidney Brown, but on the second team. So he hasn't graduated yet. But yeah, they used it a lot, Jody, a lot.
And against a pass, it's supposed to be more effective, because you're hoping that safeties are better in coverage than Nicholas Morrow would be. The worry I would have would be a team would try and run against a somewhat smaller defensive lineup. You're telling me the passes gutted them the first couple reps? Yeah, then they better get some more reps if they're going to actually use it when the season gets underway. We are Mac, McMullen, and McDonald here with you on Birds 365. It's a Wednesday morning. You know what that means. We're headed down the shore. Our pal Mike Gill from the Sports Bash on ESPN Radio down the shore is up next here on Birds 365.
you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, did you know I was the Mommy Slam Dunk Champion?
Really?
Yes, really, don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up, up.
She did it.
Again?
You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
Uh-huh.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Summer Wednesday morning here on Birds 365 with Mac, and Mike. Mike Gill, our bud from down the shore at 97.3 ESPN, the host of the Sports Bash. Good enough to jump in. All right, first things first, T-shirt identification. What are we donning today, Mr. Gill?
You know, I've been trying to make sure I have a different shirt on every single time. So today,
I got to be running. At some point, we're going to run out. I get that.
All right. Yeah.
What do you got?
Princeton Tigers. Yeah, like it.
Back to the get around to a lot of campuses, Gil. I got to give you props for that.
Well,
you think I'm running out, baby? I'm just starting.
Yeah. It's not like he's at It's not like he's at UCLA. He's down the street at Princeton. Come on, Jerry.
I've traveled.
You got a Princeton T-shirt, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, right.
No.
Well, listen,
neither do I.
I did play-by-play. I did play-by-play, and I traveled a lot when I was on the road doing play-by-play. So a lot of college campuses during my time, and now some of the T-shirts I didn't buy at the time I was on the campus. Some of them I bought after the fact. Hey, I've been to Princeton. Hey, I've been to these places.
You don't have to cop to that. You don't have to admit that. We'll believe you bought everything in the school.
Jody, if I bought T-shirts when I actually was on the campus, I'd have none that fit me.
That fit, yeah. I kind of figured that.
Yeah, I've done that, Mike, because I'm one of, and my wife hates this, by the way, but I'm one of those people that now buys a refrigerator magnet from every city I've gone to. Well, when I started traveling early in my career, I didn't do it. So there are ones that I have to get, that I have to back order, that I've already been to, but I wasn't doing it at the time.
Yeah, see, we do the beer koozie from every place we've been to. We have a koozie from the different campuses and cities that we've been to.
Now, where do you keep those? Do you have shelf in the garage, or
no? There's a good spot. You know that bottom drawer, the third one on the bottom. You dump them all in the bottom drawer. No, you just put them all in the drawer.
See, that's why you got to go magnet, because you can see them. And I got the outside refrigerator.
Well, you got to keep in mind, Johnny Mac, I live at the beach. We go to the beach. We pull out a bunch of koozies. We put them in the cooler and bring them down.
Koozies are getting used for
all right.
Down the shore.
All right.
I believe that. All right. Let's talk about the use of some Eagle players. From all reports, Jalen Hurts has been nothing short of spectacular in his repeat performance from last year's runner-up for MVP in the National Football League. Can Jalen Hurts actually be better than he was last year? He made the biggest jump from one year to another, second year to the third year that I've ever seen in the history of the National Football League. Now we ask him to jump up again. Could he actually be better than he was last year, Mike Gill?
I've been in the camp that says I think he can, and I'm not surprised that he does take a step forward. Look, we forget how young this guy is. I think I was talking to John on my show yesterday about, I used the word mature, and it's almost like an insult because he is so mature. But you got to figure he's continuing to mature not only as a person, but as a player. And this is a guy who worked his ass off to get from an average quarterback to second in the MVP. You think he's just going to rest on his laurels and say, hey, I achieved my goal, I'm stopping there? No, this is a guy who probably continued to work to continue to get better and better and better. And it's not like a guy who's 32 years old who has been working his way to this point. He's still at a point where many young quarterbacks, even the Burrows and the Herberts and the Mahomes, guys that some people perceive are better than him, those guys continue to get better even at their young age. So why wouldn't Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, and I asked Brian Johnson about that because Jalen really takes more pride, I think. Everybody knows he's got the tremendous athleticism, but, you know, when he calls himself a triple threat, I think he takes more pride in being able to beat people with his mind, so to speak, with his, you know, reading defenses, with his processing skills. And he's getting better and better at that. And that's where the improvement comes in. And that's what Brian said. I mean, it's common sense in a lot of ways, in that the more you do something, the more comfortable you get, the better you get at it. And he's getting more comfortable processing, understanding where the football's supposed to go. And I just mentioned it with Jody. I mentioned it with you yesterday. The ball's not hitting the ground when the first team is out there. Maybe 4 incompletions over 2 full practices. I don't think you get to the full hand. And that's because he's making quick decisions. He's making the right decisions. He's going to open receivers, and he's making plays. And, you know, the other stuff is already there. So, yeah, why not?
Just say, add into the fact that even if he, you know, incrementally doesn't improve himself, the guys around him are going to continue to make him a pretty darn good, you know, it's the McNabb thing. When you have Pinkston and Thrash, you can only do so much. You give him Terrell Owens, and the guy became an MVP candidate all of a sudden. You know, we always look back at McNabb's career and kind of wonder, what if he had a TO every single year? Well, that's what Hurts has. He's got a TO and more.
Well, that to me, Mike, is the hard part, because, you know, he might be a better quarterback, but might not be as good statistically. And will people recognize that? I don't know. Will the Eagles recognize it? Yeah. If he gets better, you know, but if AJ gets hurt, or, you know, you have some significant offensive line issues, you have a tougher schedule, just as bare bones as that, it's conceivable he's a better player, but the numbers were so outrageous last year, they might not be quite as good. But, you know, that's a more esoteric discussion, as they say. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing, by the way.
Well, it's the same with the team. I mean, the team might be a better outfit at the end, but their record might not suggest that they were better than the team before, you know, based on schedule and different things to that ilk. But who knows? You could be a 12-5 team and be better than the 14-3 team from a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
As John laid out, the ball is not hitting the ground much when Jalen Hurts is out there on the field. And that's a good thing, because if Brett Toth were out there on the field, the ball might actually be hitting the ground, because he's having some trouble with the snapping for the second team unit. So he's getting all his snaps in ahead of time. Good for Jalen on that. Here's the question I have about the Eagles' overall offense. And John and I talked about this in a segment before we punched you up, Mike. How do you balance between being different, giving teams different looks, not being static, but also not getting away from one of the best offensive years the Eagles have ever had as an organization. That sometimes can be a tricky balancing act because you don't want to stay the same. But if you choose to go elsewhere and do make some changes and they don't work, you go, well, why the hell did you change anything? It wasn't broke. Do you think the new offensive coordinator is the guy to be trying to walk that balancing line?
Well, he said some things yesterday I thought were interesting. Brian Johnson, a lot of people talk about Swift catching the ball. And we've discussed a lot when I've been on with you guys is, they don't use the running back much because they've got multiple other progressions before they get to the running back. And by the time they get to the running back, Hurts generally just takes off.
Yep.
But what if they have a back that they do value enough that they manufacture touches for him? In other words, they call the play that he is the first.
Johnny hates the manufactured touches. You don't want to go there, Mike Gill.
The thing that he said yesterday, he was asked two questions about. They didn't bring up Swift by name. They just said the running backs. They say, hey, you threw the ball to running backs a lot at Florida was one of the questions. And the previous question was, hey, what about throwing the ball to the backs? And his thing was, look, if we have a matchup that we want to exploit. So to your question, Jody, I thought about this yesterday is, sometimes it's matchup based. If you look at a team and you're saying, hey, they're going to they got good corners this week. Their linebackers don't cover backs out of the backfield that well. This is a week where we can manufacture touches. So it might not be where they do it every single week, but if there's a team that just says, hey, or matches up with you well in certain areas, to see if this offensive coordinator will say, hey, you got that? We're going to do this. Let's see how you match up with that. And that could be something that materializes over the season. But most times when you're looking at a matchup, and you're saying who's got the check mark, the Eagles wide receivers or the other team's secondary, there's going to be very few secondaries that win that check mark.
Yeah. To clarify my manufactured touch position, I don't like, Jody, when teams build offenses around manufactured touch players because the coaches don't have enough discipline to keep going back to it. As a curveball, yeah. As I said, if you're going to run that stupid bubble screen, I'd rather run it with DeAndre Swift than Quez Watkins because DeAndre is going to be able to break that first tackle and is going to be able to do things in space. And I don't mind that as a curveball. Now, if you're trying to build an offense around that nonsense, yeah, I don't like that.
Whoever built an offense around?
Oh, you kidding me? There's again, Kyle does it well. So, but I've been around so many players. I love Cordero Patterson. I was around Percy Harvin, who was a phenomenal player. But how do you get him the damn football consistently? You got to be able to run routes as a receiver. You want the guys. You want the AJ Browns, the Devontae Smiths, the Stephon Diggs, the Justin Jeffersons, the Devontae Adams, guys who can get open in traditional ways are the guys you build offenses around. Percy Harvin is as talented as every single one of those guys, but he couldn't run routes, so you had to figure out ways to get him the football. And for anybody who doesn't remember Percy, go look up some highlights on Percy Harvin. Just an unbelievable talent. But you can't build an offense around him, but you get him and you go, we got to build an offense around this guy. You can't. That's my problem. And maybe Kyle can, because he's done it to a certain degree with Deebo Samuel. But other than that, there's very few people that have the discipline to keep going back to it again and again and again. Whereas you just call a route to AJ Brown, what's his Twitter handle? Always open. Always open. That's easy. The other stuff, that's difficult. And that's why I don't like it. So I just wanted to clarify that position. But as a curveball, yeah, knock yourself out. It helps, and that's what the Eagles need because they got a great fastball. The Eagles got the great fastball with A.J. Devontae, Dallas Goedert, and they got to get the football. They got to get the football, and I don't know why everybody's obsessed, Mike, with getting other people the football. Like, with all due respect to Quez and DeAndre, you'll get the scraps.
Yeah,
I gotta get the football to these guys.
I do feel there is that avenue of the fan who watched Swift carve you up in week number 1, and that memory sticks of this guy's really good. Well, if you went back and watched him in week 2, 3, 4, he missed a couple of weeks with an ankle and a shoulder injury. He didn't have that same week against anybody else. He had in fact, the game against Philadelphia was the only game he had over 100 yards rushing the entire season. So yeah, he had a really good game against the Eagles, and I think a lot of fans remember that breakout performance. He said, "Wow, we got this guy. You got to give him the ball more." Whereas Detroit, I think by the end of the year, he had kind of fallen down their depth chart a little bit. So I think that does play a factor as why we envision certain guys being a bigger part of the offense than maybe the team will envision. And I stand on, if Penny is healthy, he's the most talented of the backs by far. And that if you're putting them now, John, you're there. If you put those 5 guys on the field next to each other and all say, hey, run the same play, I'm going to hand you the ball. I would have to imagine if you're coaching that team, you're saying, this guy Penny looks a heck of a lot better than with the other guys I got, if healthy.
Yeah, he's the most talented runner. I think the Eagles are enamored by, I don't think he's the most well-rounded. I think DeAndre is the most well-rounded, and I think they're enamored by that. But yeah, as far as just running the football, yeah, we've already seen Rashad do it. I mean, Rashad's a high-level runner in this league, but can you trust him? Is he going to stay healthy? If he does, yeah, I mean, I'm not comparing any of those other backs to Rashad Penny as a runner. I don't know how you could.
As John points out, when you have A.J. Brown, who got 145 targets last year, and Devontae Smith, who got 136 targets last year, only leaves so many targets left to be divvied up between everybody else. And, oh, by the way, they've got their elite third wide receiver in Quez Watkins. So I don't know how they're going to have the ball available to give to Swift or Goddard with the amount of ball sharing that they have to do this year. But here's the one thing I know. If anybody will do it right, it'd be Jalen Hurts, because he is that smart. He looks like he's even better than he was last year, which is tough to believe, but we'll see it once the season starts. All right, other side of the football, Mike Gill. The other guy who was a little talkative yesterday was their star defensive end, Hassan Reddick, who had 19 and a half sacks last year. He wants to make sure everybody knows that he had 19 and a half sacks this year and acknowledges that he had 19 and a half sacks last year, and that he's allowed to use the word elite. I think Quez kind of stretched the imagination yesterday. Oh, Hassan Reddick's allowed to say elite because he was one of the elite defensive players in the league. But then the conversation turned to how much he's being paid. And a couple of those other elite defenders, such as Jones in Kansas City and Bosa with San Francisco, are actually holding out right now because they don't like the fact that the defensive end high-end salary market has jumped and they're not there yet. Well, you sure as hell could say the same about Hassan Reddick, and it was broached yesterday in a conversation that he had. He said, yeah, you guys can see where I'm at. Both play level and salary. So he did say it'll work itself out, but I'm sure that the guys who were holding out thought the same exact thing, and it hasn't worked out.
By the way, Jody, that was Groats stirring the pot with the contract. But he's right.
Was it Groats who asked the follow-up question?
That was my first question. Yeah. Who asked that question to even bring this up? Why? Yeah. I haven't heard anything about this. And then yesterday, it's like somebody asked.
Bob's right though, because he's
not saying he's. I'm not saying that it's not. It's a good question. I'm not knocking the question, but it doesn't seem it was something that needed. It wasn't brought up at all until
no. Hold on. I actually saw the tape of that entire interview to defend my friend, the Prince of Darkness, Bob Groats. Hassan Reddick brought up the conversation of money. The first question was, how do you motivate yourself? How do you define yourself? And he said some other players define themselves by the paycheck that they get. He brought up money first. The question wasn't about, hey, Hassan, how badly underpaid are you? That wasn't a reporter stirring the pot that was just looking to get some angst going. No. Unasked, Hassan Reddick went to the salaries of the other players, then rightfully so, Groats went with the follow-up. Well, then are you underpaid? Do you see yourself as underpaid? Which is the obvious and accurate follow-up question. So I tip my cap to Bob Groats.
Oh, in that instance, fine. If he brings it up and then you follow up, well, are you suggesting you're underpaid? Sure.
Exactly the way it went down.
Yeah. Look, Reddick's not wrong. I mean, he
outplayed his contract.
He had double-digit sacks in Arizona. He had double-digit sacks in Carolina, then came here and had double-digit sacks. We talk about this a lot. People don't like to hear it. You know, John Gannon got more sacks out of Reddick than anybody else was able to get out of the guy, significantly more. So he outplayed his contract here. He signed a contract based on what he did in the 2 previous stops, and he was better here. Now, if he follows it up, you know, with another year like that, I think there would probably say, hey, we might have to think about this. But I don't like when somebody has 1 year of outperforming. That's why the Hurts contract came at such a weird time. But he was at a time where you were kind of stuck and you had to do something because he only has shown for 1 year. Now, I'm not suggesting I think that there was a fluke of a year, but you got to give me a bigger sample size before we then say, well, you do.
I don't know, man. If I were Hassan's agent, I'd be in there knocking on the door. I'd be in. I just go back to the Chiefs and Tyreek Hill. If you remember what went on there, the Chiefs had a deal with Tyreek Hill. They had a deal done. They were waiting to announce it for whatever reason. And then Devontae Adams comes in and swoops in and they trade and he gets his deal. And Tyreek's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And all of a sudden he wants, you know, more money than Kansas City can go. And he's traded and things go in a different direction. The Chiefs were able, obviously, to persevere. And Hassan explained this pretty succinctly. For whatever reason, like you're saying, now he had a career year. You're right there, Mike. But he was really good his last year in Arizona. And he was really good his 1 year in Carolina. And he was even underpaid when the Eagles signed him originally.
Well, then that's his fault.
But, well, he had a weird sort of disconnect because people thought he was a bust. Because Arizona, the first 3 years of his career, played him at off-ball linebacker like a bunch of idiots. And he was a bust for the first 3 years of his career. And then basically out of desperation, they had him for 1 more year. They said, all right, let's let this guy pin his ear back to go get the quarterback. And whoa, voila. He's used correctly. He turns into a great player. And he mentioned people still have that thought of those first 3 years in Arizona when he was essentially playing out of position. That's where I yelled at fans saying, oh, play Nolan Smith at off-ball linebacker. No, do not play Nolan Smith at off-ball linebacker. Let him do what he does and eventually develop into a great pass rusher. And for whatever reason that sticks in people's minds, and I'm not even talking about fans, I'm talking about NFL executives, and are like, what you kind of just said, Mike. Well, he's got to prove himself more. Why? There's only, I think Nick Bosa is the only guy who's got more sacks than Hassan Reddick over the last 3 seasons.
I only say that based on the contract that he agreed on when he signed here. He must have thought that value was the right value to sign the deal. So now you've outperformed what you signed for based on what you did in Carolina and probably to some extent Arizona. So you signed for that number. Well, then you got to Philadelphia and outperformed those 2 years. That's what I'm saying. If you follow up the year that you had in Philly again, okay, now you have a gripe to say, I've outperformed the deal that I signed based on what I did in Arizona and Carolina. I think I should get paid more money. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but that's what I'm saying.
By the way, and Howie's very savvy because that's one of the reasons why Nolan Smith is here, to be honest. I mean, they know this is coming, whether it's this year, next year, they know it's coming.
Right.
And the numbers for edge rushers, you know, Daniil Hunter just got the ability to make 20 million. And Hassan's sitting there at 15. And remember, it's less because, you know, he got the money up front with the guarantees. this could develop into something.
Yeah, he's 28 years old too, so it's not like you're talking about a guy who's crossed that 30-year-old threshold that the Eagles, in the past have been known to cut ties when you hit that 30. He still does have two more playing seasons under that 30-year-old age.
Yeah, they might have to tweak it. It'll be interesting. They certainly would.
Has another year like he had last year. I mean, look, 18 and a half sacks is just a tremendous year. If he has another year like that, then yeah, you're well deserving. And he's not wrong. I think he's right. I think he's top 5 sacks in the league since that Arizona season, that people don't even recognize that. This guy's been a premier pass rusher, but he took it to another level last year.
The question is to extend or not to extend, and the question that comes off that is when. And I don't think Hassan purposefully did that. I think he was just talking off the top of his head, and then rightfully so. There was a follow-up question that now makes it an issue. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't think his agent goes bashing into Howie Roseman's office today and says, "Oh, yeah? If you and I aren't talking, my guy's not practicing." I don't think he's going to pull him off the field the way that Jones is in Kansas City or Bosa is in San Francisco. But the conversations can be ongoing. Howie's been known. He didn't do any of it last year. And I know I kind of questioned it, and it worked out fine because they went to the Super Bowl. But Howie has always been a guy to be ahead of the curve and get the negotiations in ahead of time. Try and get an extension done ahead of time. He didn't do any of that last year, and they let a whole bunch of guys walk away because of it. Do you think this is going to be an extension off year for the Eagles? Will they do one or two with guys? And it can level from Son Reddick, Defensive Player of the Year conversation, to a backup offensive lineman. You think Howie does in-season extensions this year for the Birds?
We were talking about the long-term group that they have currently here, the Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, and Lane Johnson. That group you don't see on teams where the 4 guys have stayed together. So who will they prioritize as that next group of guys? And you probably have to start thinking about that now. As those guys get ready to walk out the door, you probably are going to start kind of identifying who are the next group of guys that you would want to stay here. And so, yeah, Jody, I think you start to look at those guys. Who is that group of guys that you say, all right, we want to make sure that these guys, we don't have any of these issues where they're free agents, and we want to identify them. So I guess
remember, it's the 2020 draft, guys. So,
right,
that's the Rager draft and the Hurts draft. Obviously, Rager's not relevant to this discussion anymore. Hurts has already been extended. Then you talk about Davion Taylor. No. Kayvon Wallace, I just mentioned, he's becoming a bigger deal. Maybe you can get something cheap done with him. Jack Driscoll, maybe something cheap done. Sean Bradley, Quez Watkins.
Right.
Those are the guys you're talking. So you're not talking about Mailata, Sweat, Goddard, Maddox.
The guys who would be up for that, they are not really guys that you're going to target. So I guess the question would be, are you going to go to the next group earlier and say, hey, let's talk about doing, because you're going to get Smith soon, Dickerson soon. You're going to have to
you can't. I mean, you can't get extensions done till after that third year. So they're not, that's not pressing.
Well, let me put one guy in the hopper. The elite third wide receiver the Eagles have, Quez Watkins. Are you looking to extend a guy like Quez, seeing as he's reached elite status?
Yeah, well, because Quez self-defines himself as elite, doesn't mean how he has lost his mind. Quez has got a lot to prove. But he knows, hey, maybe that helps Quez Watkins because he knows he's on a contract year. And
he's also not a guy that you would look at as identifying as someone that is a core player here 10 years from now. You're looking back and say, I mean, those guys would be, and again, they're not there yet. It would be Dickerson and Smith would be the first 2 guys that you say,
that's going to be difficult. Those guys,
right? Yeah. You want to make sure that those 2 guys are locked in, and hopefully 10 years from now, Landon Dickerson's still playing left guard at a very high level, similar to what you got from Jason Kelsey as your center for the run that you got from him, and Lane Johnson as your right tackle. You've already identified Mailata. So yeah, you're kind of out of guys this particular season to pick, but it would be it'd be kind of interesting to see if they do identify people this offseason.
But there's no, if Jack Triss was going to be a long-term 6-man, that makes some sense.
Sure.
Try to get him done as early as possible. So there could be, but not big ones. But the Eagles have proven, look, the one guy, Hurts, they got done. They got Mailata done. They got Sweat done. They got Goddard done. They got Maddox done. They'll get Smith done and Dickerson done when the time is right and when they can. They've done a very good job of identifying those players you're talking about, Mike, and getting deals.
And all those guys were all drafted by the team, whereas the Reddicks of the world, they were brought in here as free agents. So their money up front, or when they originally got here, was a lot more significant than those other guys.
So you don't think if Reddick's agent came knocking on Howie's door, Howie's message would be, "Yeah, get back to me in 12 months," that he wouldn't have a conversation with
you? Mean if he knocked on the door today?
Yeah.
I would imagine he'd be told, "Come back to me in 12 months."
Okay. All right. Just double check.
See, the problem with that is then you
He
start.
might say it not as direct.
Now, Jody, that's easy to say, but as Jody pointed out some of the names, if the player is upset and the player starts to, whether it's holding in like Hunter or holding out like Bosa, which doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint, but the hold in is the better way to go. If the player's upset, then issues arise. So, I mean, there's a real world human effect here. And Hassan's whole life basically is built on having a chip on his shoulder because he thinks he's underappreciated, and he is. And he thinks he's underrated, and he is. And he gave that. This guy was 4th in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. As you mentioned, he had 19 and a half sacks. And he gave that great quote, basically, if you don't think I'm good, basically, you don't know ball. He's got a big chip on his shoulder, big chip. And that could turn negative if he thinks he's being disrespected.
Yeah. Listen, I have a lot in common with Mr. Reddick. Believe me, we think very similarly here. He showed up. Did he bring it up to try to get it out there just to let them know, only to walk away in the middle of it? I don't see that happening. I mean, I think if he would have done something, if he was so angry, he just would have done something similar to the other guys, not shown up at all.
I think Hassan's from Philly. I think he loves it here. He loves the situation. I'm not trying to create controversy. What I'm saying is, in that scenario you guys were mentioning, if Howie Howie's too savvy for this. If Howie hangs up the phone, call me in 12 months, then you're antagonizing.
Well, that's right. He would say it a little differently.
Yeah. You're antagonizing the situation. I'm sure he's already had conversations. I'm sure he's already
What was the deal that he signed? I remember it being a deal that I was
345, 15 million per.
Yeah.
Right. So his last year,
he's already off the year he had. He's now a very team friendly contract. In 1 year, he made for what seemed to be a fair contract into a team friendly contract with the unbelievable season he had last year.
Yes, I would say
Hunter's the last one. Hunter's the last one to sign, and he's been a very good player for a long time. And he got 17 million with the ability to make 20 million. And he wasn't Hassan Reddick last year. So, and I think he's 10th on the edge rusher list. So, yeah, Hassan's underpaid by any measure. How it unfolds, I can't tell you. Yeah, but he's definitely underpaid.
What week is the bye week for the Eagles? Like
10.
they get 8 in,
10,
or 9. Week 10, so they get 9. So that's just slightly more than half a season. He's got 10 sacks by the time they get to the bye week, and I'm his agent. Oh, yeah, I'm putting something on the books to sit
Jody,
down and go face to face with Howie Roseman.
Jody, after the question that you posed and saying, hey, will they find someone? There's not a lot of options in season, so the timing might work out for him.
As far as an extension goes.
Right, where he might not say, get back to me in 12 months. He might say, listen, we acknowledge this. We really like Hassan being a part of the organization. Let us just kind of get the season off the ground, and maybe we reconvene, somewhere around, week 9 and see, before. So that's something like talking it through it. They, that's something they like to do. They like to identify players. They don't have anybody really from the 2020 class that is of big time importance. You have some depth guys that you might like to keep around, but you don't have that one guy where you're like, this.
Well, you had that one.
You had Hurts, right? You had Hurts, right?
You got Hurts done. That one's in the rearview mirror. Let me throw one more in the mix, and I fear I already know the answer, but maybe I'm reaching here to try and get a different answer. If one of the 2 free agent backs that they brought in this year, Swift or Penny, goes off in the first half of the season and is just killing it, however you want to define killing it statistically, would the Eagles actually think about getting a contract extension with either of those 2 guys?
They're gone. They're gone. That's the quickest path. If they play well, they're gone. The Eagles aren't paying, right? How many times they got to prove it? They ain't paying. They ain't paying for a run.
No, but here, let me ask you this question. Would all 5 of these guys have a shot to make the roster?
Yeah. In many ways,
I don't
think
think
that's
so.
helpful.
I don't think there's a prayer they carry 5 right now.
No, I don't think they're going to carry 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said all 5 guys have a chance to make the roster. I think all 5 guys have a chance.
Well, no, Jody's right. I meant to carry all 5.
Oh, they're not carrying 5. They're not carrying 5. But the advantage Kenny Gainwell and Trey Sermon have, and Trey's the long shot, is they have them under control for a little bit longer than Swift. Swift's in a contract year. Penny's obviously on a 1-year deal. So,
isn't Boston the highest paid back on the team?
I believe he is. I'd have to double check that, but I believe he is.
How do you walk into that room and say, "Hey guys, I'm the highest paid back in this room,"
and he's on a 1-year prove it deal as well?
You keep that under wraps, is what you do. You get on your phone, you check your banking account, but you don't mention that in the actual room itself.
Well, none of them make any money. That's the point. Now, Kenny and Trey,
somebody's got to be the highest paid. Gil's right. It's Boston Scott.
Kenny and Trey are still on their rookie deals, which is the whole point. They have extra time. And now, as Miles has proven, look, 1269, right? I guess it's potentially, if Rashad Penny's en route to that type of season, would he sign a team-friendly deal? I mean, I wouldn't. But we know what the running back market is. DeAndre Swift, if he's having that type of year, to me, the clearest path to Swift and Penny being one and done in Philadelphia is them playing tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
The only way they're coming back is if they're okay, and the Eagles can get them on another 1 year.
Yeah, and this is going to be interesting. Deal. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this next offseason. Now that all the agents and the Players Association have this full calendar year to kind of look back at the running back situation, since it was such a topic. But people have to keep in mind, when they sign these collective bargaining agreements, how many running backs are in the league? They have 2,000 people in the league. They're not making decisions based on 90 of them.
That's one of the most absurd stories. Interior offensive linemen were underpaid for years. Nobody gave up, because nobody cares about. I mean, it's supply and demand. People don't want to pay for running backs.
Right.
You can't force them. can't force them to pay for
That's the
running
biggest
backs.
issue with the running back. You wonder, though, if they would fight for, if you're the running backs, you can't franchise them, or that if you do franchise them, the number will be significantly different than what it currently is.
Then you got to, as you mentioned, Mike, then you got to open up the CBA. And why would they open up the CBA? I mean, for such a small group.
But there's one thing that could, the CBA will be reopened. I can guarantee you that. But will the union go to bat for that smaller group in the face of the entire larger group that it is? 18th game. The NFL wants to get that 18th regular season game in. If it's not next year, it's going to be the year after. They want to get to it as soon as possible, knock off another preseason game, and get that 18th regular season game. And when they do, the running backs just have to petition their union and go, you got to take care of it.
I'll say this then, guys. Why would the union, forget about the league, why would the union do that? Because the minute you do that, who's next? Who's next? The linebackers? Who they're going to say, what about us? What about all ball linebackers? What about interior offensive line? What about fullbacks? What about everybody's going to be in line. Why are you helping? Why are you singling out these?
Johnny, you're a running back hater, man. You are just a hater.
No, I meant from the union's perspective, it's not even tenable. So people say, well, the league doesn't care about running backs.
So what they get instead, John? Less practice time. Because every time the union negotiates, that's the only thing they win. It's less practice.
Well, I agree.
They never
with
get
that.
more money. They never stand up for a group. I'd say actually stand up for a group rather than go, green practices will only be 80 minutes rather than 90 minutes.
Well, I
Seems
agree.
To me, that's all they win when they negotiate with the owners.
Well, I agree that they need to stand up for a group. That group needs to be the players as a whole financially. They don't. That is what's called a Pandora's box. If you start singling out, we're going to fight for running backs, but we're not going to fight for insert this. And obviously,
well, it's a very difficult situation because of the nature of, you're a sport and you're trying to also, I guess the NFL doesn't care as much about promoting their own. It's not the NBA where they're trying to promote, but the running backs are some of the most recognizable players that they have in their league. Hey, name me a couple of NFL players. Well, Saquon Barkley and Travis, Henry and Zeke Elliott. And people know who these guys are right off the bat. Even Elliott, a guy who's a little bit past his prime now, is probably one of the more recognizable players in your entire league, which makes it different from an off-ball inside or an inside linebacker or an interior lineman. Not that means you should get paid more money necessarily, but a lot of times if you are someone who has a big following and has a big reach, that does garner you more pay.
Yeah, well, to me, it's a simple supply and demand issue. And Lloyd Howell is the new executive director of the NFLPA. Boy, you're putting him in a difficult spot if you're saying, hey, go fight for running backs, but nobody else. I mean, I think it's an absurd discussion. I really do, from the perspective of people. And there's been a lot of media people who said, you got to do something about the running backs. It just makes no sense from a logical standpoint.
And by the way, I agree with you. I'm just, looking at the other side of it, answering the question that was thrown our way about the running backs. They're not getting paid. And it just kind of snowballed down this direction. But I also agree that
real quick, you want to get running backs paid, play football like it used to be paid, and they will get paid. And they will get paid extensively and handsomely and amongst the most, what you were talking about, Mike, most high-profile players in football like they used to be.
Right.
Play football the way it used to be played.
You asked somebody to name football players. I said Zeke Elliott. He's not even on a roster. But most people, you're my age group. What are they going to say? Emmitt Smith. They're going to give you Eddie George. They're going to give you guys. the running backs were the most recognizable players of an entire multiple eras. And even in an era where the running back has been quote unquote devalued, there's still some of the most recognizable players in the league.
Well, then go back to college and get some NIL money. That's what I'll say. Because
if you ask a good football fan, but not a diehard football fan, name the top 3 off-ball linebackers in the NFL. You'd be lucky if you come up with 2 names. They would forget about the top 3. They might not be able to give you 2. So, Mike, I think you're right. The name cachet might be enough for the union to actually put them at their top of the must help out list if there is an opening to the collective bargaining agreement. Gil, we kept you way over. Thank you very much. Be tuned next week to see if he's running out of Ivy League schools. He's already put a bunch of the t-shirts on from the Ivy League.
What have we got?
I want to see a C and a C at the end of that jersey next week. Community college. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Don't care which one, but give me a CC next week. All right.
I think Cornell's got to be disrespected. I think we have.
I've never been to Cornell. Never been there. I am taking a trip. At the end of August, I might have a couple new ones for you.
Very nice. All right. Nice. Mike Gill, thank you very much. Stay off the beach.
See you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike Gill here with us on Birds 365.
Who else? Have we gotten Dartmouth? I'm trying to think of the Ivy League schools now.
He's clicked off a couple. I forget which ones, but
Columbia, I think we got a Columbia.
Mike Gill actually attending any of those schools, not happening. Kind of like you and me. We visit. We buy a T-shirt. That's all I got was a stinking T-shirt. That's the only way we.
I've been on Penn's campus many times, so I don't think that makes me Ivy League.
No, that doesn't quite get you to Ivy League status. Walking through the campus and heading off down the street to the Palestra. No, that doesn't count as being attending an Ivy League school. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back. Quick segment, and then we'll get Andrew DeCecco. I always want to say DeCicco. I know I got a buddy named DeCicco. And Andrew DeCecco is going to join us coming up in less than 15 minutes here on Birds 365.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES. Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here with you on Birds 365. We'll get Andrew DeCecco up with us coming up in just a couple from Inside the Birds. John, I want to ask you about a particular player, not an Eagle player, and I'm not suggesting the Eagles should have interest in this player, but yours truly likes to take a victory lap when I get an in advance premonition that a guy would be a good fit with a team. Like I suggested the Eagles sign Hassan Reddick before he became a Carolina Panther. When he left Arizona, I said he'll be a nice fit here in Philadelphia. They didn't. He went and joined his college coach with the Panthers for a year before he came here. Hit that one right on the head. I had the Eagles getting James Bradbury when he was still under contract to the Giants. Knew it was coming. Knew he was going to be a salary cap cut. Knew the Eagles had a need. Boom. Been a perfect marriage. But every once in a while, you get one stone cold wrong. I thought O.J. Howard was going to be a Pro Bowl tight end, like a game-changing tight end, a Kelsey-like Kansas City effect tight end in the National Football League. He got cut by the Raiders yesterday. He's already been to 5 NFL teams. He just has never panned out. And you can't blame the guys around. He was with Brady in Tampa and couldn't make the cut. Now, I know he's had a couple injuries, and that's part of it. But, man, I was just so wrong about this guy, John. I thought he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the National Football League. What the hell happened with O.J. Howard?
I think a lot of it is injuries, but even, you're right. Even before then, he wasn't taking off like his reputation would have indicated. First round pick, Alabama, yada, yada, yada. But I talk all the time. As many great SEC players as there are, and there's more great SEC players than any other college conference, it's by far college football's best conference. SEC fans are nuts. They get mad. It doesn't guarantee success in the other. There's a lot of guys, and OJ's one of them. Irv Smith, another Alabama tight end. I thought he was going to be great. Nothing to this point. Maybe he resuscitates his career in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. Maybe. He's got, as you mentioned, he's got plenty of opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's always, if you look at O.J. Howard from a trait standpoint, a measurable standpoint, I always say, if you're in the first round of the NFL draft, it ain't the traits. You guys 6'6", whatever, runs a 4.5, blah, 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 strong as all get. It's something else. What is it? He's had a lot of injuries. I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know how hard he works. I don't know the work ethic. Now, typically, I know the Alabama guys that came here, they all seem to have the right mindset, the right work ethic. So I don't know what it is, but typically my best guess, if you force me, would be injuries, but I don't know because I'm not around them. But there's plenty of guys like that who just never live up to the expectations. And he's gotten plenty of chances and hasn't worked out.
And there are some guys that, and again, I don't go to the combine. I rely on my Rick Saratellas of the world to give me the breakdown on what type of guys that they are, if they got the prerequisite work ethic, whatever else. I just watch football on Saturdays. They're starting on Wednesday nights. They keep moving that college week up earlier and earlier and earlier. But I watch a lot of college football. And, man, that kid just looked good to me. He looked like a stone-cold, can't-miss kind of player, and he was anything but in the National Football League. Sometimes you get him right, and sometimes you get him wrong, and I was wrong about that. I threw this out there and just kind of snide under the wire type way, but I do think it merits a consideration and a question. Brett Toth, backup center. If they're going to keep Juergens at right guard, and if he's doing well there, we're 7 games into the season, and he's killing it at right guard, and Jason Kelsey gets hurt and he's going to miss a game or two, are they going to move Juergens back over to center and just plug in Stein, who gets beat for the job in preseason? Or are they going to actually let Brett Toth hold it down for a while? Because I've seen your report and everybody else is reporting for camp. He's having a tough time just snapping the ball to the corner.
Well, I mean, he's not a natural center. You know, he played tackle in college, tight end, really. So, you know, he's learning the position. And, you know, that's a difficult part, especially when you're always in shotgun, you know, basically. And he's had some difficulties. So it's practice, and that's where you're supposed. I mean, Jason Kelsey still has issues every once in a while with worm burners. So, but to answer your question, yes, I think if that were the case, and you know, Jason Kelsey's always out there, but if he does miss a game, yeah, I think they would move Cam Juergens to center. And it might be Tyler Steen, it might be Jack Driscoll, but they have a lot of options where they would then insert a right guard. So I'm not too concerned about it because, yeah, they just moved Juergens over to center, and he's more than capable of it.
All right. So although the coach doth protest when you say, as Cam Juergens locked up the right guard spot, what do you mean? The competition is ongoing.
What competition? When does this competition begin?
Has not happened. And it was only just a couple of years ago. Shoot, we were doing Birds 365. We've been doing it for a while now. I forget what show it is today. It is show number 578.
578.
578 today, Johnny Mac. But this was year one that we were doing it. We talked about Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata. And Dillard started off that year getting the first team reps.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden,
that, man.
They were sharing the first team reps. And then all of a sudden, Jordan was getting more of the first team reps.
No, to be fair, they rotated from day one. So it was Andre.
But who got the first of the first team reps?
Andre. Andre got day one. Then Jordan got day two. Then Andre got day three. And it continued that way through camp until Andre got hurt. And then Jordan just took it, and
it's all
that
over.
was the
it's
end
all
of that.
over. It's all over. Yes.
Now Jordan was outperforming Andre, but Andre, boy, they wanted Andre to win that job. People forget they wanted him to win. They wanted him to win that job. First round pick. I mean, GMs want first round picks to succeed.
Well, do you think that plays in this year's competition? The fact that Juergens was a second round pick and Steen wasn't until a third.
Yeah, I don't get it. I think I mentioned that with you a couple of days ago because they've defaulted to certain guys. They've defaulted to Nakobe. But even Nakobe's a third round pick, ironically, in the same year. I know we got to get to Andrew, who's in the green room. Hi, Andrew. If he's paying attention. But even Reed Blankenship, they're defaulting to undrafted kid. With Juergens, they're like, nobody else is taking a first team rep. He's taken every single first team rep. He's been fine. He hasn't looked overmatched or anything. And for some reason, Nick keeps leaving this open-ended. It's kind of weird. And he's the higher pick. As you mentioned, he's the 51st overall pick. Nakobe was a third round pick. Now, maybe they feel they have better they don't have competition at linebacker. Right. Let's be honest. There's nobody else they can go to.
That's a big part of it.
But safety, they do. And that's an undrafted kid. It's kind of weird to me. And I haven't gotten a good beat on that, to be honest.
Fair enough. But I think it's worth keeping your eye on. We keep our eye on our next guest. We see him in the green room. He's ready to jump aboard. Andrew DeCecco joins us next here on Birds 365.
you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, did you know I was the mommy slam dunk champion?
Really?
Yes, really don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, I go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up, mama!
She did it.
Again? You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
Uh-huh. EAGLES. Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here with you on Birds 365. We are lucky enough to get Andrew DeCecco up with us from InsideTheBirds.com and their podcast and covering the Eagles on a day in, day out basis. I tried to get him earlier. We go, sorry, Joe, going to be a practice. No can do. I said, well, that's good. When we get you on the show afterwards, you'll know that much more. So we're looking to tap into your knowledge today, DeCecco. I want to get a read from you on something that we discussed in the first hour. Will there be at any point a conversation this year? When I say this year, I mean from today straight through till whenever the Eagles season ends, hopefully with a parade. Will there be a conversation about a contract extension for Hassan Reddick?
I think there has to be, Jody, to be honest with you. When you look at what Hassan Reddick has done in his body of work, especially the past few seasons, really consistent pass rusher, constantly. He's the top three, maybe even a top five, maybe even a top three pass rusher. And I think that he is someone that when he's utilized properly, you're seeing what he's able to do with his skill set. I think he still has room to even improve. He's chasing 20 sacks this year. I think that's certainly a tall task given the plethora of weapons they have as pass rushers, but I think that he's going to continue to get better. So when you look at it in those terms, I think that would warrant that.
By the way, Josh Sweat mentioned 15 or 20 sacks as his goal. I
guess they're getting that 70 again.
Yeah. That's what I said.
Getting 20 and Josh is getting 15.
They can't get 100.
70.
Yeah.
They can't get 100.
I kind of dismiss them getting 70 sacks again because it's only been done 3 other times in the history of professional football. So history would tell you, you're probably not going to do that again. But I kind of say that jokingly. Could they do that again? Could they get the 70? I mean, this defensive front, Andrew, is ridiculously loaded to the point where I think it becomes a problem, a nice problem, but it does become a problem getting everybody on the field and keeping everybody happy.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Barnett, a former first-round pick who's still just 27 years old, is your 5th edge rusher. So, I mean, that right there speaks to the just the amount of weapons, and they can throw a tidal wave of pass rushers at you. I just don't know how they're going to get everybody on the field. I mean, there's going to be some talent, unfortunately, John, that is going to have to be inactive as they sort of figure out how the rotation is going to be in the early going.
Here's the only way they get 70 sacks. If the offense is as good as we think it can be. If they're continually up 28-7,
yeah, you got to be up in the fourth
just
quarter.
pin your ears back and go, boys. What the hell? We're up by 3 touchdowns in the second quarter.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I think the offense will be the biggest reason that the defense can get 70 sacks again.
Yeah. It's a good point. You got to be in a certain situation to pin your ears back to get those kinds of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that offense, Andrew. They look good. The first team looks good. But we kind of talked about Cam Jurgens. I don't know if you were listening in the green room. It's kind of weird to me. Like every time it's brought up, Nick Sirianni kind of begs off. Well, it's not over the competition. I don't want to dismiss the other guys. Well, I'm at every practice. I've seen every first team rep. I've yet to see anybody other than Cam Jurgens get a first team rep. Where's this competition? Why are the Eagles so hesitant to name Cam Jurgens the starter? And you don't even have to name him the starter because technically they don't name starters. They don't name Nakobe Dean a starter, but he's the starter. Why did they seem to bend over backwards with Cam and say, "Oh, it's a competition"?
I would say probably to guard against complacency, to make sure that every day he's working on some aspect of his game and he's bringing, giving 100% and kind of on edge, always knowing that the job they could say, "Hey, Tyler, we're going to go with you today." So I think when you go into camp knowing that you're the starter, it alleviates some pressure and you maybe aren't as hungry as you maybe would be if you know that every day you're vying for that top spot on the depth chart.
And I asked John this, and love to get your take too. Assuming Jurgens wins the job, if he hasn't already won it, but then week 6 or 7, Kelsey's going to miss a game, or he's going to miss most of a game. He'll go in, take the first snap, so he keeps his consecutive game streak in play, but he can't really play. Brett Toth going to be the backup center. Do you think they move Jurgens back over and throw Steen into the deep end of the pool when he couldn't win the competition against a center for the right guard position? How do you think they juggle the line if there's an injury to Kelsey?
Well, John can speak to this. I certainly don't think it'll be Brett Toth as the backup center, Jody. I think that in that instance, you would probably see Cam Jurgens slide into center. And then depending on how long Kelsey would be out, I think it would behoove the Eagles to plug in a guy like Jack Driscoll at right guard in the interim, because he's played it before. And instead of having to, rely upon a rookie to be able to help, an offensive line, because, all it takes is one piece for it not to work. And I think that Jack Driscoll's proven that he can be a guy that can steadily step in there, provide some competent snaps. But I don't know that I would put Steed in there in that instance.
Yeah, I mean, if Kelsey were out for a significant period of time, it's 100% Cam Jurgens. I mean, 110%. We can make up numbers. That's how confident I would be. Now, if it's one game, then you start to say, well, maybe you can persevere with Toth, and you don't want to move Cam because he's learning the position. Then I could see a bigger discussion. Ultimately, I still think they would lean towards moving Cam. And even though Jeff Stoutland doesn't like to affect multiple positions, he's just so much better at center than Brett Toth, who's doing, he's learning. He's not a natural center. I think he's going to make the football team. But, yeah, long-term, no question, Cam Jurgens. Short-term, you might not want to affect two different positions, but that would be a more interesting discussion. Offensive line as a whole, I'll go there, Andrew. Depth is not what it once was. Jack's solid. Dennis Kelly still can play a little bit, even though he's aging. We mentioned Brett Toth. That kind of falls off a little bit. We kind of always say, well, Jeff will find somebody. He'll develop somebody. Any concerned over the depth if injuries start piling up?
More so before they got Dennis Kelly. But then again, Dennis Kelly is someone who's been a journeyman. He is aging, as you said, and he does have a litany of injuries in his past. So relying on him may not be the soundest plan of attack. That being said, I mean, I know they really like Brett Toth. There's not a lot there beyond that. Jack Driscoll's a steady guy, but not somebody that you really want to rely upon for a full slate of games. And Sua Opeta's primarily, he's just a guard. So, I mean, you're really limited. I think that there's a guy who's undrafted named Trevor Reed, who's really interesting from Louisville, but he's more of a practice squad project for Stoughton, I would say.
Yeah,
You know,
he's got to
crazy
get stronger. He's just not.
yeah, exactly.
He's an
He's
athlete.
light.
Yeah,
He's light,
yeah.
and he's 6'4", and he played tackle at Louisville, so I think he will probably be a guard at the pro level. But I think that he has some interesting traits that I think Stoughton could develop. But as of right now, there isn't anybody that you could really say further down the depth chart this year that that would constitute as, you know, formidable depth.
Yeah, John's mentioned Trevor Reed a couple of times, the guy he thinks that Stoughton would like to work with. There isn't somebody who's going to pick him up if the Eagles don't keep him on the 53. You don't think that that's the case, John? You think they'll get ticked off because somebody else picks him off?
Well,
they try and get him through.
That happened to Toth, and they were not happy. They thought they could get Brett through. But for people that forget, you know, he was the first player who sort of got that army deferment, military deferment type thing, and they changed the rule, and he was able to come back. Brett had lost all this weight because he was going on with his life. He was down to like 240 pounds, 250 pounds as a tackle. And the Eagles were like, all right, now we can sign him. We can get him going in the right direction. They're saying, but he's got to get the weight room. He's got to put the weight back on. He's got to get back to what he was as a player. And they were like, nobody's going to pick him up off waivers. And the Cardinals picked him up off waivers. And they were, you never know. But yeah, if the
didn't they lose Coyote Awashika also last year?
Yeah, but Coyote was, you know, they were so deep. I mean, they couldn't. I don't think they were mad. They were. I don't want to use the word mad. They were surprised. They were surprised that someone claimed Toth because they really wanted to work with him. And you never know. It only takes one team, and you never know what they're thinking. But I would say odds, yeah, they'll get Trevor Reed on the practice squad. Yeah, no question.
Which will lend us to a lot of fun watching the 53-man roster. I know we're weeks away from. I know we got to go through the joint practices and the preseason games, which, yeah, that's will come down to a scrum for who's going to make those last couple of roster spots. How many offensive linemen do you think they're going to keep, Andrew?
9. I think they'll probably keep 9. I know one year they kept 8, which is extremely light for the Eagles. But as I see it, as I was sort of navigating through that, I think 9 would be the number I would circle.
All right. Chody's going down roster construction because I think it's way more interesting now since they changed the rules. And you have the 16-man practice squad. Plus, you can elevate guys. So I'm going to go on the other side of the football. How many linebackers they keeping? They don't have to keep linebackers. They can get them all on the practice squad, elevate them when they need them during the week. How many linebackers? Because if you keep less linebackers, that means you can keep an extra deep. They could go 11 deep on the deep. I talked about how much depth they have.
Oh yeah,
they might lose defensive linemen if they put them on waivers. They're not going to lose linebackers if they put these guys on waivers.
Yeah, when you're looking at someone like a Kyron Johnson or a Patrick Johnson or somebody like that, you don't want to risk losing them. And I think you can only really justify keeping 3 right now, John, 3 linebackers, maybe 4 if you want to go Sean.
And by
Bradley.
the way, we're talking about off-ball linebackers because I have to clarify that because Andrew said Patrick Johnson.
No, I mean you could keep those guys
they're
on.
edge rushers. They're edge rushers.
Yeah.
I'm talking off-ball linebackers.
Yeah, I would always keep probably 3, maybe 4. But then you would be able to afford, which is what I was going to, you'd be able to keep a guy like maybe a Kyron Johnson or a Patrick Johnson by going later elsewhere, who I do think have a little bit more upside, considerably more upside than someone maybe like a Sean Bradley or a Davion Taylor at this point.
Right. I asked John this earlier. Everyone is taking notice of the contract that Nick Morrow signed, and it just kind of stands there jumps out like a sore thumb. 0 guaranteed dollars, which gives them uber flexibility with how they handle them. Let's say that Christian Ellis legitimately beats him out. Would they keep Morrow around as a backup linebacker, or would they say, he is what he is, we know what he is, and he's not going to be a starter, so Why would we keep him around just as a safety net? Would they keep a Bradley? Would they keep a Davion Taylor instead? It's the old story of if you aren't starting, you're departing. Could Morrow be on this team as a backup linebacker?
Yeah, Joe, that's interesting. Morrow to me seems like starter or bust, right? I mean, like when that signing happened to me, I didn't ever see a scenario where he would be the third linebacker or a special team stalwart or anything like that. So I think if he doesn't win the job, I think kind of like what we saw with Eric Wilson, although Eric Wilson lasted a little bit longer, I think Morrow would be on his way out. But then you would almost certainly have to go outside the organization and add a player at the position because, I mean, Christian Ellis and Nakobe Dean are vastly unproven. I think Christian Ellis only played 22 defensive snaps in his career, Nakobe 34, and then beyond that, Sean Bradley's nothing more than a special teamer at this point.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting on Thursday because Christian Ellis took over for Nicholas Morrow with the first team. We'll see if that was just sort of a back and forth or if they're going to continue in that direction, because if they are, then I'm going to have to say goodbye to Nicholas Morrow. I got to, he's a nice guy, but I think you're right. But now that we're going down that route, Andrew, Big nickel, Sean Desai unveiled it yesterday. Kayvon Wallace playing linebacker, Terrell Edmonds playing linebacker, Sidney Brown playing linebacker on the second team at times, 3 safeties on the field at once. Is that their answer for the fact that they don't have the second all-ball linebacker?
It's interesting, but it's a risky proposition, and what's kind of funny is that Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship and Kayvon Wallace aren't that much smaller than their lilinebacker, than their two starting linebackers right now.
Well, Nicholas played safety in college, so he's a converted safety.
But I think that could be they might be trying it out right now to see if that's a viable option. But I really do think that you have to have 2 guys you can count on at least at the position, 2 playable guys at the linebacker spot in order to be a functional defense. I think that playing big nickel sort of puts a Band-Aid on a wound, but I don't know if that can be something that you rely on too heavily.
Andrew, you rightfully mentioned the very limited snaps that the 2 Eagle potential starting linebackers have had in the NFL, 30 some odd, 20 some odd for Ellis and for Dean, if those are the 2 guys who are your starters come week 1. Let me give you another position where they could be counting on a guy who's done almost nothing in the National Football League at that position, and that's Zach Mack in the slot. He's been an outside corner both of his years in the NFL. I think I read today he's had all of 2 snaps in 2 years at the inside position. And we know if Maddox is healthy and fine, he's going to be there. And Zach Mack gets to stand on the sidelines and be a specials team star again. But we also know that Maddox goes down often with injuries. Any reservation about Zach Mack? They made the call before the season ever started. They're going to move him inside. I heard that he's looked good in practice, but that is an inexperienced guy who you could be having out there having to take all the snaps at that position. You got any concerns about Zach McPherson, playing the slot, backing up Maddox this year for the Birds?
Well, I've always been higher on Zach McPherson than most coming out of Texas Tech. I always viewed him primarily as a slot defender, so I thought he was largely miscast playing the outside here in Philadelphia. Obviously, he didn't have a lot of opportunity to play on the outside, given the health of Steve Nelson, Darius Slay, and James Bradbury. But I will also say that I think his short area quickness, his toughness, and his football intellect really translate favorably to the slot position, and I'm interested to see what he's able to do in the preseason playing that role, because I think that he does have some traits, and I think that playing special teams has showed you that he has that he's really astute and he's physical, and I kind of want to see if that translates into a more prominent role defensively, because I think he's certainly going to have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think Zach is pretty much locked in the slot now. They've made that move, and I'm with you. I've been talking about it for years. That's his more natural position. And the reason they feel comfortable doing it now is because they got a lot of darts at outside corner behind Slay and Bradbury. Starts with Calais Ringo. Greedy Williams is here. Josh Jobe now in his second season. Eli Ricks, everybody knows from his 5-star recruit days in Alabama. But you're a draft guy, Andrew.
Sure.
The best of them all, and it's only 4 practices, but the best of them all has been Mekhi Gardner. Wow, he's big, he's physical. He gets his hands on people at the line of scrimmage. He had the first woo hits at training camp with the pads on. He just lit up poor Charleston Rambo. They share the number 43. It was 43 on 43 crime. He has looked tremendous. And people say, well, he's undrafted, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean much. Well, they were saying the same thing about Reed Blankenship, and now Reed's
100%.
entrenched.
Yep.
Entrenched as a starting safety on this team. What do you know? What did you think about Mekhi Gardner?
Well, you know what's interesting, John, is that when I was speaking to our friend Mike Gill at 97.3, when the undrafted free agents were being signed, everyone was making a lot about the signing of Eli Ricks, given his pedigree and everything like that. But I said, keep an eye on Mekhi Gardner. He's actually a more viable roster candidate than Ricks, and I think that he could be a safety at the pro level. That being said, I love his versatility. I like his physicality. He's a smart player. He started out his career at Louisiana Lafayette, and I just really like the way that he approaches the game. He's like a bigger, more physical Josh Jobe. Josh Jobe was a tenacious player at Alabama, but I think that he embodies those traits. But he has a bigger skill set, and that he can also provide positional versatility. I do think that he is going to be a factor, when they sort of crunch down those final numbers to make the team, to configure their final roster.
All right. This week, the Eagles unveiled and made available their Kelly Green jerseys. Will anyone, and they're already out.
Wait, what time is it? We made it a minute 43.
2 days in, and they've already sold out the Kelly Green jerseys. Shame on the Eagles and the manufacturing company, whatever. They didn't project the interest from Eagle Nation. When they get delivery number 2 and they have jerseys ready to go, and maybe they got a couple of these left and nobody wants to take them, is anybody grabbing number 10 for Aaron Sipas? Is that going to be a high demand jersey? Kelly Green number 10 for Aaron Sipas this year. John hasn't given us any punter breakdowns in a couple of days. So is there even a competition? Is this another one? Well, Sirianni will say, oh, it's a competition when it's not really a competition. Is there going to be a punter competition this summer?
Well, I think there will be, but you're always going to defer to the veteran who's done it before, I think. I think Ty Zettner brings this. He brings a shine, being, an undrafted rookie. You always sometimes that shiny new toy is what everyone wants in there. But it comes down to, as John knows, not just the leg power, but also putting the ball where it needs to be situationally and things like that. And I think you won't really know what you have in Zettner until the preseason games. You know what Sipas is going to do. Unfortunately, on the game's biggest stage, he folded a little bit there. But I think, the body of work, by and large, I think you feel more, if you're the Eagles, you'll probably feel more comfortable with Aaron Sipas back there as your punter.
Yeah. If Aaron Sipas loses the job to Ty Zettner, I'll wear one of those Kelly Green jerseys.
There you have it. John, and John's certainly not going to be wearing one of those
Joe
jerseys.
Krause has got to give it to me, but I'm not buying one of those nonsense things. But and that's any jersey. Yeah, I'm not a jersey guy. But yeah, Aaron Sipas is destroying Ty Zettner.
And you know what? Going into camp, everyone had Ty Zettner penciled in without seeing him, punt the ball at the
right. And by the way, for people that don't know, Aaron Sipas got on the Eagles' radar because he was dueling with Jack Fox in Detroit in a training camp. Jack Fox, a Pro Bowl punter, really good. And he was holding up well against him. So he's always been a good camp guy. He's got a big leg. The issue with him is obviously doing it on game day in a more consistent basis. And he might not be the punter. They might get somebody from somewhere else that I don't know of. Matt Ariza might come in. They might say, well, all right, we're going to go that direction. But it ain't going to be Ty Zettner beating out Aaron Sipas. I mean, they're different species as punters, from what I can see to this point.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I never really saw it. I thought that they were going to give him an opportunity, but I never just saw it as a viable replacement for a veteran like Sipas.
All right, last one for me. And I know I'm going down a road that I probably shouldn't hear, but I'll do it anyway. Whether it's guys on the stream here on our Birds 365 show, or my WIP phones, or John's favorite social media X, or Twitter, or call it whatever the hell you want these days, people are already building up disdain for the Dallas Cowboys because Jerry Jones is running his mouth. And Jerry can open up mouth and insert foot with the best of them. He's already done that, pitting Micah Parsons against his holdout offensive lineman, Martin, who needs to get into camp ASAP, or saying that, did you two guys catch this? Jerry actually said this week when asked about putting Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor down there in Dallas, we've got other coaches to consider. Yeah, Dave Campo and Jimmy Johnson.
Is Switzer in there?
Separated at birth with their accomplishments.
Switzer won the Super Bowl, you know.
He won because he couldn't screw the team that Jimmy put together was so good that even Barry Switzer couldn't screw it up.
Dave Campo, no, that's a name.
Sorry about that for the Cowboy reference. But yesterday he said the Dallas Cowboys are better. He didn't say they're better than the Eagles. He said the Eagles, the Giants, and the Commanders better watch out because the Dallas Cowboys are better. I don't know if they are or aren't. Not with Zach Martin out of the lineup. I'll definitely say they're not as good. I know they improved at a couple of positions of need, cornerback, wide receiver, but they went backwards at tight end. I think they're going to miss Zeke Elliott. Any chance to get on Jerry Johnson's case, our stream, social media, WIP phones, people just wait to chomp at the bit to take a shot at Jerry. And, oh, by the way, Jerry took a shot at himself, idiot. Are the Cowboys better than they were last year, Andrew?
Listen, you guys know me by now. You know I'm going to call it down the line. Are they improved? Sure. Do I think that they're going to be able to get out of their own way long enough to see it through? Highly doubtful. I just don't think that there's the leadership that the Eagles have and the structure in place for them to really be able to see this thing through. And I ultimately think they're going to start out strong and they're going to be the darlings of the NFL for a while. But I think that as the season progresses and we get towards the winter months, you're going to start to see the house of cards start to fall down a little bit. And they're going to kind of do what they've always done in the December, January as of late. And I think that they're going to be a non-entity.
Ooh, non-entity. All right. Eagles fans are going to like you for that one. At Andrew DeCecco. Follow Andrew on X, no longer Twitter. I'll leave it with you here. Quez Watkins, Andrew, called himself elite yesterday. The Eagles have 3 elite receivers.
They have 2. Quez Watkins, for a player who deemed himself as elite, still has to stave off Olamide Zaccheaus, which right now he's doing so. But, I mean, an elite player is a perennial 1,000-yarder, a guy that commands the ball in critical moments. A.J.
Brown, that's an elite player.
That's an elite receiver. Yeah. So I love the confidence, and you hope that parlays into success, because I do think that he brings something to the offense that they don't already have, which is that deep threatening speed that teams have to account for. But he's got to put it out there on the field. He had a rough year last year, and it's ultimately about the bounce back. How are you going to do? Are you going to be able to gain the trust back of your quarterback in those moments when he throws the ball to you?
By the way, week 2 NFL this season. Cowboys versus New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers gets the sticker to his boy, Mr. McCarthy, again. He always seems to get up whenever they're playing McCarthy. So the Cowboys won't be spreading.
A lot of it's a revenge tour for Aaron Rodgers. He's got a bunch. He's got Mike McCarthy. He's got Sean Payton attacking his best little buddy in the corner. He's got to protect him. The big bully protecting the hapless nobody. Jody's going to have a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, motivated Aaron Rodgers. That's what the Jets needed, and they got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Week 6 is Eagles Jets, and I'll be up there at the Meadowlands. Andrew, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. We're certainly going to get you back on before the season gets underway. Thanks for jumping in this morning.
Always, anytime, guys.
Thanks, Andrew.
That's Andrew Ducheco from InsideTheBirds.com, the podcast as well. Check out Andrew's work on InsideTheBirds.com. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back. We still got a couple of minutes left to chop it up for you. John will be off to practice. You think the next 2 days, right? They're going to go regular
they're
practice,
definitely
2 days running?
2 days back to back, first time this summer.
Actually have to work for a living. There's a unique thought for the Philadelphia.
It's a grind. I don't remember the
They're
old
grinding
days.
it out. Give the Birds some credit grinding out 2
It's
practices
still,
in 2
you know,
days.
by the way, Quez also said, man, getting the pads on. Quez is like 25, maybe, you know, first time with pads on. He felt it. And they don't go 2-a-days anymore.
Did Mekhi Gardner line him up the same way he did the
No, Mekhi's still, you know, he's still on, you know, working with the third team mostly. I can't believe they haven't. He's on the second team as well at times, but you know, Quez is first team, so he doesn't. Sometimes they do 1 versus 2s, but I haven't seen that matchup yet.
No, nobody's put the wood to Quez just yet, but he's even though he's elite. He's working through some stuff because it was hard to practice with pads on. All right. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. Come back. Mac and Mac could have put a bow in the show.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom McMullen safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac and Mac here, last segment of today's Birds 365. Johnny Mac be here early tomorrow before he's got to head on over to camp. Which of the coaches you getting tomorrow? Has it come back around to, or are you getting specials before you get Sirianni again?
No, Nick is tomorrow, then Michael Clay is Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, the head coach has got to talk more than the coordinators, so Nick rotates in more.
Gotcha. So you get Sirianni early and then specials on Friday. Here's a question I'd like to ask Sirianni. And again, yours truly, not a practice, your practice. You Eagle Beat guys do a great job. And there are guys that I just flat out trust. If they say something, I believe it. I think it was our boy BLG in his wrap up from yesterday's practice said, Eagles running back protection unit, not good. That as a group, they're not good. It's not like, Swift looks great catching ball out of the backfield, but he's not great block. Boston Scott, Swift, Penny, and Kenny Gainwell, none of which did a great job when called on to stay in and protect their quarterback, necessarily was able to keep that defensive line from getting where they needed to get to. That going to be a problem with the Eagles this year? I know they don't ask much, and they've got a great quarterback who you just say, listen, we're putting our 5 up front. If they bring a blitz, we'll try and check into it and get a back to pick it up. Goddard can actually do that chipping coming off the line and still making plays. But this is not a good group of picking up the block running back room. Will that be an issue this year, Johnny Mac?
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think there's a lot of good pass protecting running backs. So that's another sort of trait that has become sort of endangered over the years. There really aren't. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott was really good at it, as Mike Gill pointed out. Not even in the league anymore. Back in the day, Emmitt Smith was great at it. Those guys don't exist anymore. Not for the most part. I can't worry about it. But it was interesting because they were doing one-on-ones on all 3 fields, so it was really difficult. They were doing receivers and defensive backs closest to Patterson Avenue. They were doing linebackers and running backs, one-on-one protection drills, and they were doing offensive line, defensive line. So I was toggling back and forth between the interesting ones, the offensive line, the receivers, and I didn't get much time to look at the backs. But they're not good.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's BLG who specifically said, they're taking offers over there on that portion of the field. But you're right. It's just not a necessity. And there are some quarterbacks you better make it a necessity. Drop back 8 steps, stay in the pocket, fire the football. Eagles don't have that. They've got Jalen Hurts who can create and get out and avoid and dive.
At least you can manipulate the pocket. You could do some things to mask that. But there aren't a lot of great. I'd have to think about who the best ones are, because there aren't a lot of great pass protecting running backs. They're not asked to do it at college, and then it becomes every once in a while, like Dallas Goedert wasn't asked to block in college. And all of a sudden he shows up in the NFL and he's like, where did this come from? This guy is tenacious and so there's certain guys that are good at it, but not here.
Not here in Philadelphia. So it'll be something that we can watch all year long. All right, Johnny Mac, I'm going to talk to you in the morning. Then you got to run over and hear from the coach, Nick Sirianni, but we'll get it done again mañana. You back with me tomorrow in the morning?
Yeah, 579 tomorrow. I think I got the number right.
Today was 578. Yes, tomorrow will be show 579. So we're making our way. I think we hit 600 before the season gets underway. I think it's right like 2 days before the Eagles play their first game. Will be show number 600. Part of a good show today. We'll get this done again tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who streamed in on Birds 365. If you're going out the door, do your boys a favor, hit the like button, give us a little love so we can get some pop out of our algorithm, whatever the hell that means. McMullen and McDonald will both be back here tomorrow in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365. the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.